Congressman, welcome back. Your take on what you've seen so far. We had our Secretary of State have a joint press conference without taking any questions from the press. His remarks were stern and straight and shows that so far we're very much in their corner. You comfortable with that?
I'm glad he went. I'm glad that thus far the administration has voiced its unequivocal support for Israel. But as we've talked about before, Brian, really the critical thing is not words, it's actions. And the actions I'm looking to see, well, let's admit, some of these actions are actions Congress needs to take. And the ongoing turmoil over the speaker's race and the self-immolation among congressional Republicans precludes us from taking up a bill to resupply Israel, to make sure they don't run low on ammo for Iron Dome, to make sure that they have the small diameter bombs they need as they launch an offensive into Gaza, to provide any other assistance that we can to ensure that they can recover as many of their hostages and we can recover as many of our hostages. So that's not something we can just blame on the executive branch. We need to step up in Congress and do that. Where the executive branch, I think, needs to change course is on its overall regional policy, which is a policy of trying to resuscitate of the Obama nuclear deal with Iran. And that really is the cause of a lot of the regional chaos. It misunderstands the traditional alliances that we've had. And Iran is, of course, Hamas's patron. Even if you don't think that Iran gave the green light for this terrorist attack against Israel that Hamas perpetrated, Hamas has, of course, undeniably benefited for years from Iranian weapons, Iranian training, Iranian financial support. And, of course, Iran's primary terrorist proxy, Hezbollah, is sitting there in the north, threatening to launch a second front against Israel. So abandoning the nuclear deal and reimposing a policy of maximum pressure on Iran is the only path forward that gets you to regional stability over the midterm. And that's where I do think President Biden needs to change course.
So how we got here is stunning, too, and it's really an Israeli intelligence failure. Here's what President Trump told me yesterday, cut 7.
We have to protect Israel. They've been, really a part of this country, the fabric of what we stand for. We have to protect Israel. There's no choice. And we have to do it. He has been hurt very badly because of what's happened here. He was not prepared. He was not prepared, and Israel was not prepared. And under Trump, they wouldn't have had to be prepared. Look at what we did for them. And we did that alone. We didn't do that with Israel. And you know what I'm talking about. We did that totally alone, not with Israel. And but they were not prepared.
It's really hard to argue. They were not prepared in any way. We still don't know exactly how they were able to pull off this attack, but we know one thing, Israel was totally surprised by it.
Yeah, and this, of course, happened near the 50th anniversary of the Yom Kippur War, which was a massive intelligence failure on the part of the Israelis. And so the parallels are actually very stunning. I would commend to your listeners an article that Mike Duran recently wrote about the Yom Kippur War, which goes in depth about the failures that led to it, as well as the broader geopolitical dynamics, and then lays out some lessons for the present day. But we clearly also did not have our eye on the ball in terms of Hamas's capabilities and intentions. And I really think there's a bigger lesson here, because part of the status quo thinking was that because Hamas had such severe challenges in governing Gaza, that they had kind of reached a modus vivendi with Israel. They wouldn't do something this brazen, which gets to this big idea of that the president voiced with respect to China, which is because China has such severe economic problems domestically that they won't risk invading Taiwan. But I think what the war against Israel, Russia's invasion of Ukraine should remind us is that sometimes terrorist groups and authoritarian regimes do things that may seem illogical from a Western perspective, but we can't graft our own sensibilities and values onto them. We have to prepare for the worst case scenario. And above all, we have to rearm, because hard power is the only common language that we speak in many cases. The best way to preserve the peace is for us to have a credible military deterrent. And I worry that that deterrent is crumbling around the world right now.
I know. I mean, we got to start building up our Navy, financing our Army, start recruiting again, get image ads out there, make people want to serve. Don't go out there with this politically correct stuff and wonder about what white rage is. That's the stuff that turns people off that normally would serve and turns off families that usually have their kids serve. And we're very fortunate to have that. I've never seen, it seems like the Pentagon goes back to school on how to get forces, which is insane. But Congressman, we're going to look at a war that is going to consist for now in the Gaza Strip, which is 25 miles long, 7.5 miles wide, with 2 million people living in it. It's a tiny sliver of land with a small port, but that's where the terrorists are. Is there a way to fight this to win and not alienate people who want to vilify Israel if there are collateral damage and there are civilians caught in the line of fire?
Well, there's going to be collateral damage. I mean, there's collateral damage in any war. It's why we should be focusing so much of our efforts in deterring war, because war, even in a limited fashion, is absolutely horrific. But I think the key thing for public figures like me or people that have a massive platform and influence like you is to push back on any suggestion of moral equivalence between the Israeli military and its efforts to defend itself and systematically dismantle Hamas and the barbaric terrorist attacks that we're seeing from this Salafi jihadist group. Because though there may be collateral damage, the Israeli military isn't going to go rape women and cut the heads off babies. These are two fundamentally different things. And some of the disgusting apologies that we're seeing for Hamas from tenured professors at American universities that receive generous taxpayer subsidies are absolutely disgusting. Some of what we're seeing from the American left to blame Israel is absolutely disgusting. So I just think we have to push back against that narrative. I worry that it's going to gain some momentum, but all the more reason why we need to remind people constantly that Hamas launched a terrorist attack against Israel. Israel has a right to defend itself, and we, as Israel's closest ally, need to back our closest ally in the Middle East to the hilt.
Here's what Congressman Michael McCaul said, Chairman of Foreign Relations. He told us yesterday, Cut 21.
When the Egyptians did warn Israeli officials, obviously there wasn't enough done to stop it. This concerns me, not just with respect to Hamas, but what about our intelligence on Hezbollah? What about our intelligence on Iran? They say there's no clear link to Iran. I disagree with that. Iran gives them $100 million a year, and we know that a lot of the weapons systems they get come straight out of Iran. So the idea that Iran's not complicit or doesn't have any fingerprints on this is absolutely laughable.
Do you feel the same way?
Yeah, I think Congressman McCaul nailed it. And I think it seems as though the administration is going to great lengths to push back on the idea that Iran was involved in this, which, you know, again, regardless of whether you think they gave the specific operational or tactical green light for this operation, Iran is Hamas's primary patron. And so Hamas doesn't develop the military capability to do something like this without Iran's support. So, I just think the administration, notwithstanding the events that we're seeing in the Middle East, is still clinging on to this attempt to revive the Iran nuclear deal. They simply cannot let go of it, and that explains a lot of the rhetoric we're seeing from the administration trying to minimize the idea that Iran was involved.
So you guys have the majority in the House for now, about 5 seats, depending on what you guys are going to do with Congressman Santos, who's just a nightmare. So you guys go behind closed doors and you decide the person who got more votes was Steve Scalise over Jim Jordan. Jim Jordan endorses Steve Scalise. Kevin McCarthy says, don't nominate me. Go with whoever gets the most votes. And it's Steve Scalise. But yet, this is what we heard, Cut 26.
Would you vote for Steve Scalise?
I would not. I plan on voting for Jim Jordan.
I'm not supporting Steve Scalise. I'll be voting for Jim Jordan.
It's not over. I'm still throwing my support behind Jim Jordan for Speaker.
I'm concerned he doesn't have the votes to get to 218, and so we should probably resolve that before we go to the floor.
Main concerns are the way this place is run.
And you think Scalise will continue that?
I think that there's a problem with leadership in our conference. Publicly voting for Jim Jordan.
And then Boebert says, I want Chip Roy. Chip Roy says, I'm a hard no. What's going on? You can't lose this many votes. What's going on,
I know.
Mike?
Well, you said we have the majority, but do we? I mean, if we can't come together on something this simple, like, do we have the majority in any functional sense? I don't get it. I mean, I don't know if people didn't play enough team sports growing up. I think everyone should be forced to do that because with a narrow majority, our only strength is if we stay united. Now, that doesn't mean everyone has to agree on anything. You don't need to agree with the speaker on every policy issue, but we need a speaker just to manage what comes to the floor. And so I fundamentally don't get it. Listen, I've been frustrated with the process in Congress. I understand that. I think there's steps we can take in what remains of this Congress to fix it. But, we got to unite behind the person that got the most votes in secret, or we're just going to be in total chaos, and we're going to hand the Democrats a massive political gift. Like, the American people are crying out for sanity right now. They're crying out for basic competence in light of the overreach we've seen from the Biden administration, the absence to enforce a border, the crazy Green New Deal policies, the deterioration of our military position around the world. All we got to do is not be crazy. That is really what it boils down to, and we will win elections. And I fear we're about to screw that up if this continues.
Right. So are you going to, when you get behind closed doors, could Jim Jordan and Kevin McCarthy do more to say, don't vote for me?
I think so. I think, maybe Jim needs to go individually to all these holdouts and say back Scalise. Otherwise, we're going to have to start exploring more creative options. Maybe Jim, being a state champion wrestler, can wrestle for it. I don't know. Let's start. We're going to have to start experimenting at this point. It's getting crazy.
Was there going to be a vote today?
I hope so. We're having a member meeting at noon that was just announced. So everyone needs to get behind closed doors and yell at each other again, and maybe that will resolve things, and we can go expeditiously to the floor and resolve this whole darn thing.
Hakeem Jeffries would take it if you want to nominate him.
Well, okay. I mean, talk about an own goal. We're just gonna gift this thing to the Democrats right now. I'm sure he would love that, which is all the more reason why we need to unite. We need to get behind a speaker candidate. Again, you're not going to agree with the person 100%, but we need a speaker to move forward. All
right. Congressman Mike Gallagher, there's a whole lot going on in the world and in Congress. Thanks so much for sharing your views and insight.
Thank you, sir.
All right.